Hey guys, Pretzel Man 945 here. Welcome back to another video. Today I am going to be reviewing an anime that I literally just finished watching, like the final episode of, uh, like a minute ago, and that is Vinland Saga. Sorry, that I was showing my computer. That is Vinland Saga, and my gosh, it was fantastic. It was so good. So, Vinland Saga is an anime all about Vikings, and immediately the thing that sticks out is just how different it is. I guess it feels so fresh, it feels so unique, like so different from anything else I've tried pertaining to anime, and I really, really love that. Um, the first season is like a perfect example of how you do an amazing revenge story. Um, because you're introduced to Thorfinn, who is an absolutely fantastic protagonist. Um, that really does an amazing job of portraying the themes of um the of the show as a whole through his character arc. Um and um Askeladd kills his father. And so naturally within the first season this creates a fascinating, fascinating dynamic between Thorfinn and Askeladd, where Askeladd every time they duel always like beats the shit out of Thorfinn because he's a much, much just better like swordsman um in general than Thorfinn is, and he's just more skilled, like infinitely more skilled in combat and strategy and like emotional manipulation and things like that. And it just creates this really interesting dynamic between the two because it's like um Thorfinn obviously hates Askeladd so much, and his only desire in life is to get revenge against Askeladd. Um, but at the same time, it's like he's willing to do what Askeladd says, all because he sees it as a means towards his own goals. And this dynamic that's created from this is so fascinating and so just rich with it just fills the show with personality. And I love that for it so much. Um, Another thing, I guess the next thing to talk about would be Askeladd as a character. Because he is an absolutely fantastic villain. Um, Partly because of his extremely unique relationship with Thorfinn, but also because he is an extremely nuanced and fascinating character as well. Um, because he kind of has this like mysterious leadership quality to him. Um, but you can't really put a finger on like what is unique about him until you learn that he is actually half Dane and half like Celtic Welsh or Roman Celtic or whatever they call it. And he actually hates Danes. And this twist was extremely fascinating for a number of reasons because number one, it completely changed the dynamic that he had with every single member of his troop, I guess, like crew, army. I'm not really sure what the word to use for it is, but like his men, essentially. Um, and especially with Bjorn, because even though he hates Danes, Bjorn was like the one person that he ever considered to truly be his friend. Uh, and so, I think that relationship is just extremely unique and really interesting. Um, and the way this culminates in like him eliminating like half of his men is just such an interesting development um in the way that it turns out. And then the twist at the end, because like throughout a lot of the first season, it's very much established that Askeladd is a massive strategist. He like very much plans things out. He's an amazing like judge of characters. He can read people super well. He can like get a feel for their intentions really, really well, which helps him formulate his own plans while also being able to conceal that from other people. And then at the very end, when King Swain essentially has him backed into a metaphorical corner, and he can't really do anything that would save Wales by himself. He just cuts off King Swain's head. And let me tell you, I was not ready for that. That was utterly mind blowing. But at the same time, it worked so well because of what has already been learned about his character. And I think Ascalon in particular is this excellent example of how to make a character more interesting by giving more information tiny bit at a time. And as such, when there is a drastic character change, it actually makes sense because of subtle hints of information or established beforehand, and Askeladd's character is a brilliant example of this. Um, Now I'm going to talk about possibly the most complex character and the most well-developed character in e- either of the two seasons, and that is Canute. Canute starts out as this essentially he's essentially a wimp. I wouldn't really say he's a coward necessarily because he does have a certain strength to him when he's first introduced about um and that strength I guess is like he knows who he can rely on, which is a valuable tool that will serve him very well later on. But he's also a gigantic wimp who doesn't feel like he can make decisions without his father's authority at first. And then he has a very long conversation about what it means to be a God-fearing man and what I guess the will of God is. This isn't like religiously undertoned, by the way, but the impact of religion is a major consequence and concept of this series that makes it really unique in the way that that handles into the themes of things, and especially Canute's character development, because after this, he essentially becomes like a complete badass dude who like um fakes out people for his death and is like very hugely planning. And granted, part of that is because he has Askeladd as his advisor, and retainer or whatever the word is, um, which is just another interesting dynamic that makes Askeladd such a fascinating character. But this is about Canute. Um, and his relationship with his father is something that is extremely complex because it is like this very, very toxic yet loving relationship at the same time. And King Swain in particular, I think, is also another really well written character because he's very, very bipolar in his actions, essentially, but also at the same time, he tends to be of one mind when he is calculating risks and making decisions. And I think that duology is extremely interesting and so, so well done. Um, I think that's everything I have to say about season one. Obviously, I mean, some standout things that are going to be kind of obvious. The animation is gorgeous. Whether it's more environment focused by Wit Studios in the first season or more character design focused by Mappa in the second season, the music is absolutely top notch, and the action scenes are also top tier. But I feel like that's pretty obvious to get out of the way. And so with all that said, the first season is a really great contained kind of revenge story and talking about how revenge is not always the answer and there are different solutions and um and I guess kind of like showing the problem with pursuing a course of action like that that is purely driven on hate. Um And then we get to the second season, and the similarities between the two are about as connected as a broken glass window if it was hit by a baseball. Um, because essentially the entire second season turns into farming simulator. And I said that season one is really great. Season two is a goddamn masterpiece because it somehow manages to take every single major, like at least several major characters and completely recharacterize them in different ways while also providing a satisfying conclusion to the character arc that we started in season one. Um, and it also introduces many fascinating new characters that also experience their own character arcs, and at the same time, it manages to incorporate a whole slew of other newer minor themes and it manages to thread them together to the major themes that were established from the first season to establish one coherent message for the entire show. Um, and I basically have nothing but positive to say about this because I guess starting with Thorfinn, who stands out as an excellent protagonist doubly as much as the first season because it's not very clearly explained how he got into slavery, and and part of me kind of wishes that that was explained a little bit better. But at the same time, the other part of me liked it the way it is because I feel like the kind of ambiguity with which the story starts out and how we're introduced to Thorfinn being a slave means that there is a lot more freedom they were able to take in the direction with which his character could go. And because his entire life it's this just unique perspective of only knowing war. It means that his experiences farming give him so much more perspective in such a unique way. Um, and I think that also being able to see how much his character grows from this and how he has to learn to emotionally solve himself and that his only enemy truly is himself. And then to see this carried on further, where he thinks he's put it to use, but then he has to go back to resorting to violence in order to stop a conflict. And seeing him once again struggle with a problem he's already solved provides this additional level of depth that makes his character arc like that much more interesting just because of that added detail. Um, and easily my favorite character in this season was Canute. And continuing on from the first season, it is especially apparent in this second season how essentially he and Thorfinn are opposites. They are foils of each other's character on every single level, and it makes their relationship, especially during the second season, extremely interesting. Um, and Canute in this season essentially hardens up a lot more than he did. Like in the first season, he essentially became a man and learned how to deal with things in an adult way. In this, you really get the sense that he's starting to deal with things in the manner that a king would, and he's having to essentially dictate his own morals for deciding how he wants to act as a king and a ruler. And that kind of perspective, along with all the advice he gets from different figures and how this helps influence his own set of morals, is extremely interesting to watch. And it's like very captivating too, because with Canute, I feel like as an audience, the audience is like very hyper concentrated on what he's doing at all times because the politics that he engages in is very much like a subplot compared to what Thorfinn and Einar are doing. Um, but it's still really, really interesting to see. Um, and the way that and I love the little detail of King Swain's head haunting him. I think this is a genius detail because it further like builds upon the effect that his fractured relationship with his father had on him. And also with this happening, you also kind of get further like retroactive characterization for King Swain, and it's a brilliant demonstrator of just the difference in character between them and how they each dictate their own set of morals, which I think is really interesting. And also later on in the season, I love how Canute represents like the dangers of power and how he almost gets corrupted, but the influence of Thorfinn as a foil character is able to stop that. I'm gonna cap it there because I have a lot more to talk about the second season, but Canute is my favorite character in the show overall, I think. Um, just like because of the wholly complete character arc that he gets between both seasons, and the fact that it feels by far the most complete and the most well written and satisfying. The next character that I really want to talk about is Einar, brilliant side character that represents the angle to nonviolence as being able to restart and being able to let go of your past and 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 be able to just look toward the present and the future. Um, and I also love his relationship with Thorfinn because I feel like it is such a fascinating dynamic where Thorfinn learns the value of hard work. Um, and Einar at the same time learns the value of thinking in a different way, changing perspectives. And I think that the way that they each bounce off of each other to change perspectives is almost like a north and south. It's kind of like magnets switching with each other because it's like you have the two norths and then north south north. You get the idea. It's like an alternate series of magnets. The relationship because of how many ways they conflict, but also come together. In the changing perspectives, and I think that dynamic is really interesting. Also, he's just an extremely entertaining character as well. Um, the other major character I want to talk about um is Arnheid. Because her character is so interesting in providing this perspective of what it's like for knowing someone that they will not have their freedom. And then her emotional complexity is um increased fivefold with the reintroduction of her husband Gardar, and getting to see that backstory between them was beautiful. And understanding their dynamics as a family and her personal set of values and why that's so important to her, and ultimately how in Thorfinn and Einar they discover their purpose for living, um, also on top of gaining new perspectives on how to live that life and why it is worth living in the first place, which I absolutely adore. And Ornstein's character is also extremely tragic, and it is an amazing example of how to write a tragic death to a character. I also love the Kettle family, because there's so many unique dynamics between them. Through Old Man Spherical, you kind of learn the values of hard work even more because of how old he is, and it's also used to further change Ion's perspective to not cling on to the past because Spherical has regrets about the past excuse me, that he explains, but he also explains that he was able to get over them through hard work and through changing perspective. Um And Kettle himself, I think, is really interesting because he kind of is like this very normal seeming exterior, but throughout the course of the season, he just slowly breaks down more and more until he essentially kind of just has a full on mental breakdown near the end where he just goes insane and he just start commanding armies and such. Um, and that kind of fall to descent, I think, is another really interesting reflection to take on this theme that's introduced of the effect of power and wealth and how that can corrupt a mind essentially, but also not in the way that you would think, because power can corrupt differently than wealth. And I think the way that that is presented by having Kettle on a slippery slope is amazing. Also, I'm not going to talk about him as much, but props to Omar as a character. Well written, interesting perspective, and I like how he complements with Snake. And I love and I love Snake's development as well as being like this issue of confidence is just really unique. Um, so overall, Vinland Saga is this amazing anime because it feels so fresh and it does so many things different, but it does all of them. And as a result of that, it manages to make something that is extremely unique and very profound at times. I would highly recommend Vinland Saga to basically anyone. I think anyone can unless you might be slightly averse to all the blood and gore in the action, then I would say that I could recommend Vinland Saga to anybody. It is really, really good, and I think that it has the ability to appeal to an absolutely massive series of audiences that would be very diverse. So yeah, that is going to do it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.